All right, so we want to write the method longest streak. It's intended to determine the longest substring of consecutive identical characters in the parameter str and print the result. So if we're given this string, we can see that A occurs the most consecutively, and it occurs 5 times. So therefore, it should print A space 5. All right, so let's do it. Let's copy and paste method header. And you should be doing this, you should be indenting, should be doing everything that you should. So once again, you can either type in this or you can type in a REPL type situation and then print it, take a screenshot and submit it as far as that goes. So I'll just type though, which is a little bit annoying with the spaces and indenting, but it works. So the first thing we want to do is we want to establish some variables. So I'm going to say that we're going to have an int count, which we're going to set to 1. And this is going to test how many times that it's consecutive in it. I'll mention just in a bit about why it's at 1 and not 0 here. So we're going to have int max, which is going to be the maximum times that that letter occurs. And we're going to start it at -1. And think real quick about why we're going to do that. We want to make sure that anytime this is exactly like the longitude latitude one, we want to start our max at the lowest possible value that it could be. In fact, 0 would be just fine here as well, because the first time that we have a letter, we want then that to be the max, just in case our string is just one letter. So that it'd be like, yep, that one letter is the max. So you always want to start a max at the most negative or the smallest value, and you always want to start a min at the highest possible value that it could be. And then the last thing we're going to have here is we're going to have char, and I'm going to call it letter, which is going to be the letter that is actually the most repeated. And in this case, you can't just do an empty string like this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put whatever fun symbol I want to. I'll put an exclamation point here. Actually, there's an exclamation point in the string, so that's probably not the best thing to do. I will put an asterisk there. Once again, that's just a placeholder, just to be like, okay, if that is actually what's printing, then there's something wrong with my program. All right. And so then let's actually start the program now that we have these variables declared and initialized. So we need to do a loop through everything. I'm going to do a for loop since I know exactly how long the string is that we're using. So for int I equals 1, I is less than our string dot length. And I plus plus. Now at this point, I'm going to make sure that I indent 4 spaces so that we can keep our indenting going. Right, and so what we want to do is we want to see, first of all, if we have consecutive letters. So I'm going to say a statement that says if str.char at I is equal to str.char at I minus 1. All right, and what this is going to do is it's going to test if the character that's at I is equal to the character at I minus 1. So because I'm using chars, we can use equals equals. If you wanted to do, you can do the same code if you want to with substring. And in that case, you'd want that to be a string, not a char. And you'd want to make sure that you're using the dot equals command, not an equals equals. Either way works. If you know you're going to be working with just one letter, then I would assume that char is probably the way to go. It's a little bit easier to work with it. If you remember in the assignment 4 video, we use char at that point too. So it just gives us the one specific char at that index number. Once again, if we set I equals to 0 and we do I here and I plus 1, we are going to get an out of bounds error at the very last one that we check. And so the way to avoid the out of bounds error is to make this a 1 and then to check I minus 1. So we're checking the character before it. So therefore, the last character that we check we'll check the exclamation point with the T. So instead of checking the exclamation point with whatever comes next, we're checking exclamation point with the one that comes before it. And that's the way to avoid that out of bound error there. Okay. So I'm going to press enter. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces in now so that I can keep indenting it since we have an if statement. So if that's the case, I want to do count plus plus. So once again, if we have the same character, we're going to do count plus plus. And this is why we start count at 1, because if I have 2 consecutive characters, so let's say C and C, and I started my count at 0 and I increased it because they're the same, count would be at 1. But how many C's do you see? You see 2. So that's why we're going to start our count at 1. And then if we see a pair, we increase that count so that it tells us there's 2 of them. Which once again would work for, I'll just do this example with T's, right? The first time we compare T's right here, we'd increase our counter to 2. And then the next time we see a pair of T's, it would increase the counter to 3. The next check would be the T with the exclamation point, so which would not count. So that would say that I have 3 T's in a row, which is exactly right. All right, so we're going to increase the count if it is, if they are the same. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry. And then if we do increase the count, if we have the same letters, we now have to check to see if we're at our max. So this is going to be another if statement, or what we would call a nested if statement, since it's an if within an if. So if our count is greater than our max value, then we want to do 2 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're at 8 spaces now. We want to set max equal to count. So once again, if I look at this real quick and I look at just my C's, the first time it says, yes, we have a C equal to a C, then our count would increase to 2. And so now, is 2 greater than -1? Yes, it is. So the max is now going to become 2 because I have 2 C's. And then we're also going to capture the letter that we're working with. So letter equals str.char at I. It doesn't matter if you say I or I minus 1, because at this point, the only way that we're inside this if statement is if they're the same. So either one should give us the letter that we're working with. So we're basically recording that our max consecutive letter is capital C right now, uppercase C. Once again, there is more than one way to do this code. This is just an efficient way that I saw it in my brain, but just like a math problem, you can usually solve a math problem different ways. Same thing is true for a coding assignment. In fact, your coding assignments that you guys do should all be different because I know nobody thinks about the code the same way. Typically, my solutions are pretty efficient, but I have seen students create more efficient code than me every once in a while as well too. So, and it doesn't necessarily need to be super efficient, but that should also be your goal. All right, so this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The end of that if statement, right? So if we've got to our where our count is greater than max, we want to record those 2 pieces of information. And then that's also going to be the end of that if portion. But we do need an else here. So if our string.char at I does not equal the next one, that means that we don't have a consecutive letter and we need to reset our count. So we're going to say count equals 1 so that we can reset it at that point. And we can end the else statement. We can end the for loop. But then I do still need to do what it says, and it says to print the result. So my printed result is going to be system.out.println. We're going to say our letter, which would be our maximum letter, plus we want a space, and then plus the number of times it occurs, which would be our max value. And then that will end the method. So once again, here is a piece of code that accomplishes it. You can actually take this code, put it into REPL, change the longest streak, actually change all of that just to main, and then just create a string str that equals cc AAAA TTT exclamation point to test the code if you wanted to see if it works. Obviously, you can test your code right now, but you will not be able to test your code when you take the AP exam or take the final. So once again, there is the code for that.